Furry? Maybe. Alright, so we're back again. Yeah. I didn't expect the last video to get more than 10 views, and explaining all this stuff to you guys is actually pretty fun for me. One, it allows me to express all of this useless idea in my head. I'm very big brain. And also allows me to take as much of abuse of my FLVS class as I possibly can. Because as long as I have all of their lessons, I can literally just read from them and teach you guys what you need to know. And so that's pretty cool. Although I'm probably going to need water. Hold on. Alright, so it's now about 3 minutes later, and I'm full with water. So let's do this. Yeah. Terrorism. Very big problem. But we're going to be talking about it today. Yeah. We're not just going to be talking about that one fateful day, but we're going to be talking also about international, domestic terrorism, as well as some theories on current situations in America. And hopefully that's all going to be really cool. And yeah, let's get to it. So, you want to know a fun fact? Who were the first people to attempt to fly a plane into something? Fun fact, it was not Al-Qaeda. It was the member of the Popular Front of Liberation of Palestine, which for short is PFLP. They hijacked 5 airplanes bound for the United States and London in England, which is British. And they had U.S. citizens on board, and eventually they were redirected to Dawson Field in the country of Jordan. Now, the PFLP is actually a part of the Palestine Liberation Organization, or the PLO, who were basically sympathetic to Palestine and wanted the release of political prisoners in Europe and Israel because the United States supported Israel during the war, and Palestine didn't really like that, especially when you have a lot of extremists there. They also accused high suicide bombing attacks on embassies as well as the barracks. That barrack attack killed around 300 American and French soldiers, which was really sad. But it still didn't end there. I love being really not serious about very serious things. Anyway, these Dawson Field hijackings did not really center on American radar, but it would still become terrorism in the Israelis and Palestine. As a result, the only thing that was really changed here is that the airports got a bit more secure, but that still didn't help with what was going to come. So first of all, what we're going to have to see is what the hell is terrorism? And what we're going to be reading from is the definition that's given by the United States, the federal law in 2021. Terrorism is an act that is a violation of criminal law of the state of the United States and is intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, or is intended to influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or is intended to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Now, obviously this doesn't cover everything, but I'm pretty sure they did about 90% was okay. Now, of course, there was actually some problems with this, and it was a bit complicated to define who they are. Mostly because some of these terrorists may be citizens of the U.S. that are working with terrorists, and therefore leaders from these countries may be reluctant to hand over their own citizens. Another reason is the countries may not support the U.S. legal process, and that also enforces onto the reason why they might not want to hand over their own citizens. The countries might agree with the terror group-based basic views, despite not supporting the group's methods. And these countries may be supporting the terrorists, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Now, all of these problems still actually are in foreign policy today, which is interesting, as we're about to go over that, as well as some other incidents that happened. So let's get into it. So we, of course, first we have to talk about, first we're actually going to talk about Osama bin Laden, who formed Al-Qaeda with Arabs. Now, this was formed when and was used to fight against the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan that began in 1979. And this was an extremist group with the goal to unite Muslim people across the parts of Europe, Africa, and as well Asia. And to achieve this goal, they would, of course, violence. And eventually, Al-Qaeda and the U.S. became a victim, specifically the USS Cole, in 2000, and, of course, that fateful day with the Twin Towers. So, first of all, let's go over some different types of terrorist attacks that you might not totally know of. First of all, I'm actually going to get my notes out for this because some of the notes in here are not that descriptive, so we'll find. So there actually was a first World Trade Center incident that happened before 9/11, 2001, which was actually more of a truck bomb at it was below the North Tower on February 6, 1993, and it killed around 6 people and injured about 1,000, which is still extremely devastating, although not as devastating as the worst one. These 6 extremists were convicted of the bombing, and they were trying to avenge the Palestinians faced from the U.S.-aided Israel. Now, a lot of these groups were actually, I should probably go over this. The sparking problem that caused most of this was the fact that the U.S. supported Israel during the war of, I think it's Yom Kippur, which is actually a Jewish date of celebration. Why is it always after Jewish celebrations? Anyway, there was also another one, which is more of a domestic terrorism, because most terrorism did not actually happen outside of the United States. A lot of it happened inside of the United States. For example, April 19th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh acted alone, and what happened is he parked a truck loaded with explosives next to the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. This was in Oklahoma City, and the explosion in total killed about 168 people inside, which includes 19 children. Now, this is the most screwed up part. Later, he actually admitted that he was sad he did not cause more damage, and he would describe the dead as collateral damage. And the person who helped him build the bomb was Terry Nicholas, a former army buddy. And the reason was he was a militia extremist who believed the government was infringing his rights. Now, obviously there's a lot of extremists today, and we can all probably figure out some extremists that are linked to these cases that happened. Let's move along in chronological order to the sad day. Just overall sad. Now, the 9/11 attacks, 2001, was one of the most deadliest, if not actually the deadliest terrorist attack that has ever happened on United States soil. 3,000 people in total died on that day. And that's not a joke. If you want to even comprehend how large that is, most schools in the United States, or at least that I know, have around 1,000 people. Now imagine 3 schools wiped from the face of the earth. That's how many people died on this one singular day to violent causes. And it should not be forgotten. It absolutely should not be forgotten, and it never will be. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda members from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Lebanon, and Egypt hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and internationally crashed into 2 of the New York City World Trade Center towers. Another crashed into the Pentagon in Virginia. The 4th one crashed into a Pennsylvania field, which is a really heroic story of the passengers fighting back with the great quote, "All right, America, let's roll." And I honestly salute to that. Al-Qaeda claimed the attacks were because of U.S. support for Israel and U.S. politics interference with the Middle East, which kind of backs up what I said about the whole reason that these happened. Now, continuing back to the domestic terrorism, in 2003, arson plagued San Diego community. This was from an eco-terrorist group known as the Earth Liberation Front, and they actually claimed responsibility for setting fire to a housing project. This in total costed about $50 million. Now, that's about 5 mansions, or at least 1 apartment in LA. And luckily no one was injured, but there was reports of bedsheets near the area reading, "If you build it, we burn it. The ELFs are mad." And sadly, this case was never solved, but it was suspected to be eco-terrorists and animal rights activists, which were obviously extremists. But even today, these were suspected to be the legitimate threats to national security. Great job, PETA. Not that PETA had anything to do with these. That's its own type of group. Now we're going to be moving into more modern problems, because a definition as well as a category of terrorism is mass shootings. And obviously a lot of us can kind of relate to these very serious issues that are happening. And we're going to start in 2018, October 27. In a synagogue, 11 Jewish Americans were killed. They attended Saturday morning Shabbat services. The shooter, Robert Browers, was armed with an assault rifle and 3 handguns. He attacked the Tree of Life synagogue and reportedly stated to police, I'm not even joking this, "I just want to kill Jews." And that is messed up. Eventually, he was charged for domestic terrorism and, of course, hate crimes. I actually don't know if YouTube is going to take these videos down due to the sensitive content that is within them, but if they do, I just want YouTube to know I am not at all in support of any of these people, and they're in jail for a reason. And this isn't hate. This is history. Both start with an H, but one starts with memory. Now we're going to be moving to another domestic terrorism act, which was the El Paso Walmart shooting, 2019. On August 3rd, 2019, total casualties were 20 people and 26 injured. 20 people killed. That's equal to an entire classroom. These are real issues, people. They were charged at and assaulted during Walmart shopping at El Paso, Texas. Patrick Cruces was arrested and has been charged with the crime, which federal government called act of domestic terrorism. Cruces made white supremacist and anti-immigration claims before the shooting. So, yeah, he was supreme racist and against immigration, which still doesn't validate him. He's in jail for a reason. Now that we've talked about all this, now we're going to move back to 9/11. More importantly, how the government actually responded to it. Now, the entire world was absolutely shocked when 9/11 happened, and the response was also just as shocking. America was obviously a little bit more than a little pissed. Early investigations afterwards declared that Osama bin Laden was the suspected leader. He denied involvement with it at first, but eventually reported responsibility a few years later. The American and their allies, which is basically the entire members of NATO, declared an attack against all members of the Al-Qaeda and most pledged support for the United States. Many people responsible for these attacks were supporters hiding the fugitives within Afghanistan. The Taliban was an extremist group that had taken control of Afghanistan through civil war, basically taking advantage of them, following the withdrawal of the civil war of Soviets in 1989. Now, the Taliban rule by the strict rules of the Quran, as well as extremist Muslim ideology. Now, everything in this is extremist. I'm not making any stereotypical say. These Taliban provided safe haven for Al-Qaeda operatives while it controlled the country from 1996 to 2001. The United States, with the help of NATO, invaded Afghanistan and removed the Taliban from power really quickly. And the United Nations later sent peacekeeping forces to secure the capital of the city in 2003. This is where stuff gets a bit controversial. In 2003, the U.S. military invaded Iraq and removed the dictator Saddam Hussein from power. Now, a lot of U.S. officials long supported Hussein of supporting terrorist organizations, but the largest concern was that he was using biological weapons against the Iraqi citizens known as Kurds. And the original worry is that he was seeking weapons of mass destruction. The only controversial thing is that there was no evidence to this assertion, which still leaves it really up to the debate today. The entire U.S. military worked to restore peace to Iraq following the 2003 invasion, and of course, Hussein was tried, captured, and eventually executed by the Iraq government. Fall of Hussein threatened to lead the country into civil war, as the two big Muslim groups that originated before that were competing against each other for power, like hungry dogs. Definitely not a really good repeating of mistakes, but I'm not going to judge. Eventually, President Barack Obama ordered the returning troops to come home at the end of 2011, and some of the representatives, as well as business operatives, still remain in the Middle East to continue diplomacy and, of course, human civil rights. Now that we've gotten off with all the juicy stuff, now we're going to be more discussive over shootings that have been happening recently. Now, the FBI actually considers these as lone offenders and causes of domestic terrorism. As on the FBI.gov, internet and social media, international and domestic violent extremists have been developed an extensive presence on the internet, though messaging platforms and online images, videos, and publications. These facilitate the group's ability to radicalize and recruit individuals who are receptive to extremist messaging. Social media has also allowed both international and domestic terrorists to gain unprecedented virtual access to people living in the United States, an effort to enable homeland attacks. The Islamic State of Iraq, Ashadam, ISIS in particular, encourages sympathizers to carry out simple attacks wherever they are located, or to travel to ISIS-held territory in Iraq and Syria to join its ranks as foreign fighters. These messages have resonated with supporters of the United States and abroad. Now, that's just a quote, and obviously that doesn't, now that I actually read it, it doesn't really prove my point. So I'm going to leave all of this up to you for debate, and I want all of you to look into the comments, if you've even watched this far, to tell me exactly what you think. Are these shootings that are happening now in America, which are a real big issue, considered domestic terrorism, or are they something else? Let me know what you think, because I'm honestly very interested about all of your guys' opinions. Thank you so much for watching, and this was an overview of terrorism.